Good morning. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. We are the California Cities Latino Caucus, and we're here today talking about how to be a climate champion. We know that climate change is a big issue that's facing us, and we are here so that we can talk about how you can be a champion in your city, no matter the size, and we've got some great speakers with us. So with that, let me get started. I'm going to have SVCE go first. First, I guess, let me just introduce myself. My name is Yvonne Martinez Beltran. I am a council member in the city of Morgan Hill, and I serve on the executive board for the Latino Caucus. I'm also very active in the League of Cities Peninsula Division, and I'll be your moderator today. So here we have SCE sponsor Justina Garcia. We're really glad to have you. They're doing some exciting stuff in climate change. And so, Justina, if you want to go ahead and take it away.
Sure. First of all, thank you, Councilwoman, and thank you to everyone. I'm so pleased to be joining you today for this webinar. And thank you to Erica Arriaga, Alicia Aguirre, Councilmember Ray Marquez. Thank you all for the opportunity to join you all this morning. As you mentioned, I am Justina Garcia. I'm the Principal Manager of Policy Engagement and Local Public Affairs for SCE, or Southern California Edison. And just very quickly on behalf of SCE, let me just say we're proud to partner with Cal Cities Latino Caucus to sponsor today's program because the focus of climate action plans is so important. And I'm really excited about all of the ideas and the work that the speakers are going to be sharing today. For those of you who are familiar, we are at SCE, one of the nation's largest electric-only utilities. And we deliver power to 15 million people in 50,000 square miles across Central, Coastal, and Southern California. It's a very diverse region, as you know, and we are seeing the devastating effects of extreme weather and the health risks to the residents of our service area with our most vulnerable communities, who are, of course, the less resilient communities being at highest risk. You may know this because we all watch the news, but we faced heat storms in the summer. We're, I think, under another one that just starting today. And I think September is one of the hottest months on record, right? We had that hurricane just, a couple of, what was it, last month, a tropical storm, Hurricane Hillary, and an earthquake. And we had record-setting rainstorms and snowpack runoff this past winter. So in all of these instances and every single day, we know, and it's very clear and sobering, that electric reliability is so critical, and we need to keep the power on for our customers, but the challenges are getting greater. We have average temperatures increasing. Extreme heat can affect electrical equipment, reducing the capacity and useful life. Wildfires, as you know, are getting more common with a longer wildfire season. It's now year-round. There is no season anymore. And sea level is rising. It threatens coastal communities and our utility infrastructure. So for these reasons and many more, we are very committed to climate planning. We applaud the topic for today. And we have been focused on climate change. I mean, I think we've all been talking about climate change for so many years, but now the newer conversation is a much forward-looking conversation. It's how we adapt, how we plan for the future. We completed our climate adaptation vulnerability plan in May of last year, and that's a forward-looking risk assessment based on climate forecasts. Based on that study, we proposed to state regulators 120 million in climate investments. We sponsor the California Resilience Challenge, which funds climate adaptation projects in underserved communities and for Native American tribes, very important. And we help cities with elements of their climate action plans too, such as community hazard assessments, electric fleet adoption plans, electrification reach codes, and efforts to start up community resilience centers. So this is how we as a utility are taking action and being a climate leader. But we know that we cannot do this alone. No one ever succeeds alone. We want to be partners with all of you, with the communities that we serve. And we know that local climate planning is critical. It's actually required by law now. Senate Bill 379, approved by the governor last year, requires climate planning on the part of local governments. And statewide, only about half of California communities are in compliance with SB 379. So there really is no better time to start your planning than now. Historic levels of funding also are now available, as you all know, to local governments through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the IIJA, the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA. And more positive funding news arrived just a few weeks ago with the EPA announced that local governments can apply for $4.6 billion in competitive grants to implement climate action plans. So that's a huge opportunity for local governments. And almost on the same day of that announcement, we published a paper, Countdown to 2045, and it's the latest policy paper.
Thank you so much. Come back if there's some more time at the end, but I want to go ahead, move forward.
Thank you.
Program.
Sure.
Thanks so much, Justina. Thanks so much. So now I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Jorge. I see on here, and he can go ahead and introduce our next speaker. Jorge.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. You're a little chopped up. How about one more try? And if not, go ahead and just move forward.
Test.
All right. So what? Go ahead and.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Okay. There we go.
Okay. Perfect. Sorry about that. We're having technical difficulties here.
You know what? I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Jorge, we can't understand you. It's all chopped up. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce the next speaker. I'm really sorry. We're not able to, we see you, but we're not able to hear you. So the next speaker that we have.
Is it better if I take off my camera?
It's a little bit better. Sure. Why don't you try one last time?
Okay. Hello, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. My name is Jorge Chavez. I'm the Vice Mayor for the City of Bell Gardens. And I have the pleasure of also being on the Board of Directors for the Latino Caucus of California League of Cities. Briefly, I want to introduce Oscar Cisco, who's going to be touching on the Senator's work, my very own state Senator, Senator Lina Gonzalez, a very climate resiliency hero out here for Southeast LA, Sela, and the city of Long Beach. So with that, without further ado, I'll go ahead and introduce Mr. Oscar Cisco. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me and having our office come to share a little bit about what we do, and also to talk a little bit about Latinos and climate change. You know, to start things off, I just want to set the scene here. In Long Beach and in the Southeast LA, our district, we see the effects of climate change firsthand. Our district ranks between the 80th and 100th percentile of one of the most polluted areas in the state. So this for us here in the district, this is a fact of everyday life. The effects that we see from burning fossil fuels, from the wildfires and the devastation that we see through extreme weather. We see that every day here firsthand. There's been other things too, like the Exide battery plant facility that polluted the almost the entirety of the Southeast LA area. 100,000 residents impacted by Exide recycling battery plant. And so it's very important to us here because the Southeast LA is 94% Latinos. So for Latinos, we are on the front lines here. And climate change not only affects our quality of life, the air we breathe, but it affects our health. There's so many intersections here, but let's touch a little bit on the topic of health. Here in the Southeast LA, mainly, we are along the 710 corridor, in the Port of Long Beach. You got the trucks coming through, but you also have the train yards up here in the northern portion of the 710 freeway. And we breathe all these chemicals in, we breathe in all these particles, and our constituency does have a higher percentage of asthma rates compared to the rest of the county. Latinos are 21% more likely to live in areas where the heat, air pollution is a big factor. Talking on heat, where our area, Latinos tend to live in areas where there is a 6 degree Fahrenheit disparity between temperatures between non-white Hispanics and Hispanic groups. It's quite devastating. 5 degrees. Imagine 5 degrees on your AC. You lower it maybe just 1 or 2 degrees, and you feel more comfortable. Well, we're talking about 5 to 6 degrees here, and that is devastating to our population. Number one, because our population tends to work outside more often. Let's think about our agricultural workers who are more Latinos. They're predominantly Latinos, and they work outside in this heat, or as construction workers, and Latinos tend to work outside more, so the heat affects us more. They affect our lungs more. That's why we see higher death rates amongst Latinos when it comes to heat. Latinos are 3 times more likely to die from heat on the job compared to non-Latinos. And we're talking about life or death here. And addressing climate change, sure, it's not just us, it's everybody. And we all have to join together to fight this, the burning of fossil fuels. We need to fight this together. But what is quite devastating is that it tends to be the groups that don't contribute as much to climate change that are more affected by this. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about what we're doing now to fight that, or to combat that, because we could spend all day. There's college seminars and college classes. You could spend 16 weeks just talking about how bad things are for everybody in the world, how things are bad for Latinos. But what is California doing? Well, first and foremost, California has set ambitious goals to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We've committed to carbon neutrality by 2045, and we are well on our way to meeting that target, because we're investing heavily in renewable energy resources. We're investing heavily in solar, in wind, in hydropower to transition away from fossil fuels and to reduce our carbon emission footprint as a state. The senator sitting on the transportation committee, she is the chair of that committee. Transportation is one of the big carbon emitters in our state, and we're responsible for a significant portion for our emissions. But we're undergoing and we're leading that transformation and that transition away, and encouraging the adoption of electric vehicles, expanding our charging infrastructure to make sure more EVs are accessible to all Californians, especially here in this district. In the Southeast LA, we've had one of the lowest adoption rates towards EV. However, what we have seen within the past couple of years is that there is already benefits in adopting electric vehicles. We have seen 3% reduction in asthma-related emergency room visits in our area, in Los Angeles. We are leading the way. California is leading the way in this fight against climate change. This year, the senator authored Senate Joint Resolution 2, which is the Fossil Fuels Proliferation Act, the Anti-Proliferation Act, where we are joining, not only just California's joining in reducing carbon emissions, but we are encouraging our other friends in our union and in the United States and other countries to join us. We have one of the only, and we have a fully functioning cap and trade program to fight this. And that's just a little bit of what the state is doing, but what the senator has done. Let's talk a little bit about some of her bill package last year. She co-authored SB 1020, the Clean Energy Jobs and Affordability Act. She authored SB 1251, which is the Zero Emission Vehicle Equity Ombudsman Person, which ensures that the state EV programs are equitably centered and support underserved Californians. That is key, because if we just toss money to the problem and people buy electric vehicles, they were expensive at first. We've got to ensure that it is equitably focused. SB 1314, stopping enhanced oil recovery. SB 1382, Clean Cars for All Equity. Our bills are equitably focused. Our bills target communities that are vulnerable to this and target communities that will benefit the most from this. Because going back to what I mentioned is that there is already viewable and tangible data that these bills and these policies are working and are bettering our health, but we have a long way to go. And so I just wanted to thank you all for just listening to me. Feel free to reach out to our office and to ask us any questions moving forward. But yeah, I'll just turn it over to you guys now.
Thank you so much, Oscar. That's great. And we did get a chance, Latino Caucus did get a chance to meet with Senator Gonzalez. We were heavily impressed with the actions that she's taking and your team there, leading the charge and leading the way for Latinos. I see my colleague Jorge saying thank you for coming out and joining us. We really appreciate you being here. So I want to now we'll go ahead and get started with some of the nuggets here. And really, what we want to do is, so we've talked about climate change and we've talked about the impacts, and I think we all see what's happening in our different neighborhoods, communities. And what's great about this call and this webinar is we have representation. We just got a great synopsis of what's happening down in Southern California. Right now, we're going to switch to Northern California as well, and we're going to hear from what's going on up here and what people have been doing to take steps. So I serve on the Silicon Valley Clean Energy Board for here in the Bay Area, and I've been on there for almost 5 years. And one thing that I've constantly talked about is that we cannot meet our climate goals unless we bring the Latino population with us. We need to bring everyone with us. We need to bring all the different minority groups. Everybody has to be, as Oscar said so many times, it needs to be equitable, because there's no way we're going to meet our targets if we only bring half the population along. And that's what this is about. It's about gearing up leaders. It's about educating you to understand how can we help meet those goals. Well, what we want to talk about is climate action plans. And today we've got representation from a big city and a small city, where you can see how those were done and the different approaches that were taken, what maybe are some of the key elements that you want to have in those climate action plans, and how you can make that become a realization for your community. So with us today is Eddie Flores, who's a council member in South San Francisco, and he was working with the Climate Action Plan for South San Francisco, working with his sustainability team. He's going to introduce them. I have people that I've been working with in Morgan Hill. We're a very small city and took a different approach, and we'll do that just after. So Eddie, if I can hand it over to you, my colleague on the Latino Caucus board, and take it away.
Thank you to my colleague from Morgan Hill. Really appreciate it. Good morning. Buenos dias, everyone. My name is Eddie Flores, and I serve as council member representing District 5 here in South San Francisco, as well as serve as vice president for the Peninsula Division of the California League of Cities. And as you probably have heard, I'm also on the Latino Caucus board of the California League of Cities representing Northern California. As we all know, climate change is not only impacting our natural environment, but also threatening the health and economic vitality of our comunidades across the state, just how Oscar described the health disparities that exist. To that extent to which South San Francisco is impacted by climate change is dependent on our actions today. I believe that by curbing GHG emissions and adapting our community to the already changing environment, we can significantly reduce the damages incurred from climate change. Here in South San Francisco, some of you might already know, we're the birthplace of biotech and life sciences. We have over 250 biotech and life sciences who call South San Francisco their world headquarters. But we're in a unique position to become a regional climate leader by implementing citywide policies, incentives, and education programs to deploy new technologies, to pilot regulatory mechanisms and spark really behavioral change to meet the deep and really understanding what that looks like. And how have we done that? Well, in October of this past 2022, jointly with my colleagues on council, we adopted a new climate action plan, which covers amongst many areas of clean energy, transportation, water efficiency, and a safe and resilient water supply, and some other areas which my team will share this morning. Our climate action plan provides an actionable blueprint. We wanted something that we could not just put in a book and shelf away, but really something that will guide us. And we wanted this to be an inclusive process to be able to achieve the city's climate action goals. And it was created really with an inclusivity lens, right? Understanding the social determinants of health and racial equity that this has placed. Oscar also mentioned about the contamination aspects and the disparity that happens. My district as well has had a lot of that. So these, along with environmental regulations and the various input that we received from various stakeholders, was also solutions driven, and that's what we're happy to bring forth. I am very excited this morning to be joined by Cristina Fernandez, who serves as my Chief Sustainability Officer in the city of South San Francisco, and she's also our Deputy City Manager. And we will also be hearing from Sammy Taylor, Principal with Ramey and Associates. They are the consultant team who will describe the work done here in South City and really lay out the blueprint that we now have before us as our climate action plan. And with that, I'll turn it over and invite Cristina Fernandez to take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member, and good morning, and thank you so much for having me. As Council Member Flores mentioned, I'm Cristina Fernandez, Deputy City Manager and Chief Sustainability Officer here in South San Francisco. So I think first we want to start with sort of the why, right? Why would we do a CAP? Why would we invest so much money in a CAP and in a general plan? So, you know, the city continues to see extreme weather patterns and rising sea levels. You know, in California alone by 2100, we're anticipating an additional 7 feet in sea level rise. And that could result in millions of dollars in damages. As Councilmember Flores mentioned, we are the birthplace of biotechnology. A lot of our biotech and life sciences are along the waterfront, so that's very concerning for us. So we have a vested interest in sort of protecting our economic hub. South San Francisco is also seeing sea level rise impacts with 1 foot king tide waves over at our marina. So that's definitely concerning. So as a result, the city felt it important to embark on a climate action plan. And just to kind of lay it out, the framework, climate action plan is really sort of a guiding document to create new policies, programs, and services that support our community goals in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. You know, the city did have a CAP back in 2014, which did set our emissions targets through 2020. In 2019, the city began the general planning efforts and thought it was important to include the creation of a CAP as a part of those efforts. So it was a pretty lengthy process. It was a 3-year planning effort. We kicked it off in 2019, and as Councilmember Flores mentioned, you know, it was adopted in October of last year. You know, the city felt like we really needed sort of a lot of technical expertise, and just given the anticipated amount of public engagement, we decided to go ahead and hire Ramey and Associates to assist us with this process. You know, and as a result, we did a very robust public engagement over the period of 3 years. Again, as a part of our general planning efforts, the city convened a community advisory committee, which consisted of a community representative from each district in our city, who then provided sort of guidance and feedback as we went along with the general plan and the CAP. We also had visioning workshops, forums, pop-ups. We included feedback from our youth advisory committee, our developers, our planning commission, and we also just had general community outreach meetings. We had over 1,600 participants in person and virtual, because this was, 2019, 2020. So we did some virtual and some in person. And we had over 500 folks respond to our online surveys. Translation services were available at all of our events, but we did have a primarily Spanish, for Spanish speakers, downtown pop-up event with English translation. So really, Sammy Taylor of Ramey & Associates will get more into the details, but our CAP really aimed to reduce emissions by 40% by 2030, 80% by 40% by 2030 and 80% by 2040. And we have a long-term goal of carbon neutrality by 2045 in line with the state mandate. And so with that, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Sammy to kind of get into further details as to all that our CAP entails. And I know Councilmember Flores and I and Sammy are more than happy to kind of speak with folks after this. If you guys just want to shoot us an email or give us a call, we'd be more than happy to kind of discuss this further. So thank you, and I'll hand it off to Sammy.
Thank you, guys. I'm going to share a quick presentation. I feel like you guys have covered some of our intro, so we can breeze right along and get into kind of the meat of the CAP. All right, so if everyone can see my screen, fantastic. So again, thank you so much for having me here today. My name is Sammy Taylor, and I'm a senior sustainability planner with Ramey & Associates. Not quite a principal yet, but working towards that direction. But thank you for the vote of confidence. So let's just dive right into the meat of it. So like Christina had mentioned, and Councilmember Flores had mentioned, South San Francisco is already experiencing and already observing changes to temperature, precipitation patterns, sea level rise, wildfire, and more. And we know that based on past trends and forward-looking analyses, that we can anticipate that these changes will continue and even accelerate in the future. So while climate change is serious, we do have the power to act and the solutions to make the impacts more manageable and less costly. And so it won't be easy to do, but it's certainly something that we can and should take on. So like Christina mentioned, this CAP development was a bit of a unique process. The city undertook a comprehensive update of the general plan, the climate action plan, and the zoning code all at once. And so the general plan, as you likely know, sets the 20-year vision for the city. It establishes the pattern of future development across the city and provides policy direction and guidance across 12 different chapters. And so the climate action plan builds off of the policy direction established in the general plan and acts as the city's greenhouse gas reduction program. It inventories emissions and establishes and assesses the effectiveness of different GHG reduction measures. And then to implement the pattern of future development across the city, as defined in the general plan, the zoning code establishes development standards and processes. It also supports the goals and actions outlined in the CAP. And then finally, the GHG technical analysis that we put together was also used as part of the general plan EIR, environmental impact report, and has now also successfully been applied to part of the new, or as part of the new Lyndonville specific plan within the city. So the South San Francisco CAP builds upon the values outlined during the general plan process. And throughout the very lengthy and robust engagement process, we consistently heard about 4 core values. Those are livability, diversity and inclusion, sustainability, and innovation. And so while the actions describe what we do, the values really articulate how we implement those future policies and programs. So to help define the climate solutions, we worked with the city to develop this climate action plan. And so the climate action plan represents the city's program to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in line with the state and local targets and contributes to statewide efforts to reduce climate change. And so the through the CAP process, we inventoried greenhouse gas emissions, established emissions reduction targets, developed strategies and measures, and then set up the steps for the implementation and monitoring and evaluation of the CAP. And so the CAP is really a short-term planning document, and the measures have about a 3 to 8 year implementation timeline. So those values that we just kind of went over and the principles and engagement help to shape the climate action plan outcomes. And those are to achieve carbon neutrality by 2045 and reduce emissions 40% by 2030, equitably mitigate and address the impacts of climate change, and realize the co-benefits of climate mitigation across to help create a sustainable community. So the first step is to create a greenhouse gas emissions inventory. And so the inventory shows how emissions are changing over time and really lets the city know, where we're starting, where emissions are being generated, and can show us opportunities for reduction. So you can see here that in 2017, the most recent emissions inventory that we conducted as part of this plan development, transportation was the largest sector, accounting for 44% of emissions, followed by energy use at 41%. So this allowed us to set our targets and realize the areas in which we needed to reduce emissions to get to align with those targets. So we also put together a forecast. So as the city continues to grow and we use the growth projection based on the general plan so that everything was aligned, you can see that the city emissions continue to grow, but they do so at a slower pace due to existing local climate related work and the state and federal climate policies that are already in place. So we developed mitigation measures in these sectors based on the guiding principles of the general plan, not only to reduce emissions, but to help us achieve the city's vision by making decisions and taking actions that help to create and maintain affordable, safe, attractive, amenity-rich neighborhoods, continue to provide high quality and accessible services, facilities, and amenities for residents throughout their lives, ensure a safe, convenient, and accessible transportation network well connected to the region, ensure South San Francisco is a resilient community, and maintains a prosperous downtown and local economy. So based on that, we developed over 50 measures, including measures for the city to demonstrate leadership by reducing its own emissions. And this phased-in implementation approach puts the city on the pathway to carbon neutrality with a focus on foundational actions first, such as maintaining participation in Peninsula Clean Energy, their community choice aggregator that provides access to clean electricity to power the decarbonization of buildings and vehicles, and then a focus on initiating the most impactful measures, including building and vehicle electrification, which I know you'll hear more about in a bit, and transportation demand. So the city can then shift to focusing on the less impactful measures and carbon sequestration to help close the gaps in any GHG reduction. And then of course, this plan is also flexible, so the city can be responsive to funding as it becomes available or other needs or priorities as they arise. So next, I'll speed through kind of the sector action plans. There are a lot of measures, but the priorities are highlighted throughout. And this list really gives you an idea of how robust and detailed the plan is. So we'll just start with clean energy. And the priority action in clean energy is to continue procuring electricity from PCE, or Peninsula Clean Energy. For new buildings, the priority action is to expand the city's REACH code to include non-residential new construction, which they are currently in the process of doing and are currently conducting stakeholder engagement around that effort. For existing buildings, it's actually broken out into two action plans, one to improve energy efficiency and reduce energy use and thus the demand on the grid, and the other is electrification. So here in electrification, the most impactful action is to develop an equitable existing building electrification plan, which will include a suite of policy options, incentives, and future requirements for the electrification of buildings. And again, that takes advantage of the clean energy provided by PCE. And then the strategy for transportation is both to clean VMT through electrification and reduce VMT, or vehicle miles traveled, through land use coordination with the general plan, transportation demand, parking policies, and bike and pedestrian network improvements. So for solid waste, the most important action is to comply with SB 1383, the Short-Lived Climate Pollutants Act, requirements to divert organics and food waste from landfill. For water and wastewater, reducing the amount of water used both indoors and outdoors and increasing efficiency is the most important component of that action plan. And then finally, finally, beginning to plan and prep for various carbon sequestration projects like restoring Colma Creek are in the carbon sequestration action plan. And actions in this plan have many benefits, including those related to climate adaptation and public health as well. So like I said, and like you've heard, the city is also committed to reducing their GHG emissions through more sustainable operations. And these are some of the ways that they can do that. And again, continued monitoring and evaluation of the CAP measures to ensure the GHG emissions are being reduced. And since this is also a living document, to allow for the integration of new technologies or policies as the climate landscape and markets continue to evolve. We included a whole CAP, GHG, and innovation action plan under city leadership as well. So this graph shows the expected emissions reductions from implementing the CAP measures, and the city is mostly on target for becoming carbon neutral by 2045. And so quickly, I'll talk briefly about the plan for implementing and monitoring CAP progress. So these are the steps to implementing the city's CAP. They include establishing partnerships, equitable program development, a focus on cost effectiveness, alignment with funding opportunities, and monitoring and evaluation. So most importantly, the city is committed to ensuring equitable implementation that allows all residents, especially those, or really all people in South San Francisco, especially those in disadvantaged communities, to access the benefits of climate action and ensuring that measures don't create an undue burden. So many of these issues will be addressed through future program design and structure using an equitable implementation checklist. And this checklist was developed to help staff consider procedural, distributional, and structural equity when designing new programs to help implement the CAP. So with that, again, I would just like to thank you so much for having me today, and I'll turn it back over to Yvonne.
Oh, thank you so very much, Sammy. That was awesome. Really gave a very comprehensive overview of what you can have in a climate action plan and ideally would want to have in a climate action plan. Now switching gears a little bit, we're in Morgan Hill, and Morgan Hill is a 45,000 residents in Morgan Hill, maybe 46 actually, I think now. And we really had been wanting to do a climate action plan. There was no shortage of wanting to do this across, my council and in the community, but we have a very limited budget with being such a small city. And so some of the things that we came across was the resources. And what I happened to discover was that there was a group of volunteers in Menlo Park, and they were professionals in their field in working in environmental issues. And they came together and wrote the climate action plan for the city. And so when I heard that, I thought there was really something there. I had been working with a youth group called MyCat Morgan Hill Youth Climate Action Team, and they were very excited. We have an AAUW chapter that was very excited, the Sierra Club. I'm on the Silicon Valley Clean Energy, and there were just a lot of different groups who wanted to participate. And so with that, in talking with the city and hearing the limitations we had with resources, we kind of decided to take a different approach and see whatever we could do to kind of get a cap on the market. So I have with me here Shannon Rossow, and she was interning with the city at the time, and you'll hear from her. She did a lot of leading of this project and writing it, and it was really quite an impressive move from the community, seeing them all kind of come together to get something that we thought was possibly out of our reach. So you two can have that. So with that, I'm going to have Shannon if you can come on and join us. She's with the Sustainability Department in the City of Morgan Hill. She was an intern with us at the time that the CAP plan was written. We introduced it. The strategy was to come in. We came in with a resolution that we would be looking to do a CAP plan, and then the council was able to approve that and wanted to move forward with the actual CAP plan. So Shanna, if you want to give a brief intro and then show us some of your great slides and tell us about your experience.
Great, thank you, Yvonne. Yes, can everybody see my slides that I'm sharing on the screen? Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm Shannon Rosso. I am now an environmental program coordinator with the city, but at the time that Yvonne is referencing, I was a part-time intern, and this was one of the many projects that I took on. And I'm happy to see what has been created through all of the community efforts. And I'm excited to share with you how our smaller city was able to create a fully developed CAP with those limited resources. And it's great to hear how San Francisco also went about this, being a larger jurisdiction. So with that, I'll move on to a little bit of our CAP development process. The Morgan Hill Climate Action Plan was developed out of necessity. In 2021, as Yvonne mentioned, the City Council unanimously decided that the time for climate action is now. What we did is we looked at what the biggest factors were contributing greenhouse gases to our communities. And as you could see in San Francisco's slideshow too, with the pie charts, is that really we had building electrification or building greenhouse gas emissions and transportation greenhouse gas emissions. So we looked at those and we wanted to really focus our CAP solely on the factors that were contributing the most. So that's here where we took our CAP, we focused it in on these two items, while other CAPs can contain many more portions and different features to their CAP. So based on the limited resources that we had, we wanted to make the biggest impact in the most efficient way. And what we had to work with was a very modest budget of $20,000 to create our CAP, one part-time intern employee, such as myself, with my supervisor overseeing, and a community of dedicated volunteers that joined together for bi-weekly working groups. So we did not have a large team working on this. It was just a small group effort of dedicated folks who really wanted to make a difference in our community. And how we went about building our CAP was by looking at those around us. So we looked at neighboring cities throughout the area, such as Menlo Park, Sunnyvale, Palo Alto. We looked at many different cities of different size and scale to see what they included in their CAP and what the important features were to include in this guiding document. So we took those items and figured what would work for our city and tailor it exactly to these factors of building decarbonization and the electric vehicle expansion. Some items that you won't see in our CAP, if you want to take a look at our CAP after the meeting today, we don't address things such as the water efficiency, carbon sequestration, sustainable goods, and solid waste reduction. Those are all items that we are working on, but they're not a part of our CAP. We wanted to focus really on the biggest chunk of the pie. We wanted to see what our limited resources could really make the biggest impact in the most efficient way. So this here is a timeline of this development. So I think it is a great feat that we were able to develop our CAP in 5 months and then have it adopted in just 7 months. So with, starting in 2021 June there, we had the council members approve this resolution, which adopted a budget that we were able to focus all of our resources for developing this into those two categories of transportation and building electrification. So after the June 2021 meeting, we then hit the ground running and we held a community meeting. So at that community meeting, we introduced what this topic was, how it's going to, be a part of the city moving forward. And we really wanted to invite community members to participate after the community meeting. So what we did is we invited people to come work in this volunteer working group. And we did have a few members that did show interest. And so we held bi-weekly meetings with them. and they were for the months of September and October. So for just 2 months, we really broke it down, and we would go step by step, how many actions we wanted to see, how many goals. We really looked at, where we wanted to be and how fast we wanted to get there, and how feasible it really was. How reasonable were these requests and goals that we were setting? So then after our working group concluded all of our meetings in October 2021, the CAP was drafted and moved towards City Council adoption, which happened in December 2021. And so now that we have an adopted CAP, the next step is just to be working and implementing to meet all of those goals that were established. And in the CAP, we do have one main overarching goal that has 5 action items laid out. So we did break it down in a very similar way, where we have an overarching goal and then those specific action items that can get you to meet that goal. And then we have our building decarbonization, which has 2, and then it breaks it down further with our actions. So it's having that goal and then breaking it down into its further action items. The last thing that I wanted to share with you all is those community members. They were a huge part of this development. We hosted these community meetings at the very beginning of the project. We sent out, newsletters, website updates, social media, and every way that we could possibly get to reach our community members. After these 6 individuals came forward, we did meet with them throughout those months of September and October to develop what we now have as a written guideline document. The members here, they do have a diverse background of different age groups, different climate, income levels, and really we spoke about how could this climate action plan be implemented by each of these different members. So having a diverse group there gave different perspectives and different ways that we could reach our community, and having them feasibly and reasonably take the steps that are laid out in the CAP. So these are some of those members. Again, I'll just emphasize that with our limited resources that we had, with a small working group such as this, a 1 part-time employee, 1 supervisor overseeing the whole project, and a $20,000 budget, we were able to create a CAP, which I encourage you to go look online at our website and explore that a little bit more. But that is a climate action plan that we are now implementing daily, and excited to see, how it impacts our community for the better. I'll pass it back to Yvonne.
Awesome. Thank you, Shannon. That was amazing. Thank you. I want to go ahead and I don't want to further it. I want to go ahead and get Zoe on. I don't see you. Oh, there you are. So Zoe from Silicon Valley Clean Energy. And we thought we'd have her speak a little bit on some of the things that Morgan Hill had focused on, looking at really electrification. So Zoe, if you want to go ahead and take that away.
Fantastic. What a wonderful conversation so far. And it's so great to see this diversity of approaches, right? We all know, as folks that work in local government and local communities, that there's no one size fits all, but we really need this diversity of approaches. So yes, exactly. Stepping in, building off of what Shannon was talking about in the Morgan Hill approach, I'm going to talk a bit about this kind of focused approach, but also apply it to how it relates to communities across the state. So before my time at SVCE, I worked with dozens of cities on kind of climate action decarbonization, from places like Fresno to places like Los Angeles to smaller communities, right? And so there's some really key things that are the same in all of these diverse places. One is that your emissions come from transportation and buildings by and large, right? Some folks have really big industry in their communities as well that will take up a lot of emissions, but there's not that much that local governments can really do around industry. Those are regulated by the state. But basically like 40 to 50% of emissions are gonna come from appliances and buildings, and 40 to 50% of emissions are going to come from on-road transportation, something about that in every community. And as has been touched upon, and Shannon really emphasized this too, is that then when local governments are thinking about taking action, one, everybody has limited resources. one. And two, local resources really need to be spent and focused in areas that benefit the community. So the sweet spot of climate action, as I see it, are things that are going to really improve public health. I really appreciated the earlier conversations, right? Like we talk about climate planning, we think it's this kind of global issue, but really it's fundamentally about community planning and building public health and resilience, right? So you need actions that are going to really improve public health while decreasing carbon pollution, of course, and then building community resilience. Right, we are fighting climate change as we are dealing with the impacts of climate change. As Oscar really pointed out so well, this happens even more intensely in Latino communities and other frontline communities. So it's even more important than any actions that are taken really bring that community benefit. And so focusing actually on building pollution-free buildings is like this really great intersection that can help to reduce pollution in communities while also building that climate resilience. So let's talk a little bit about why that works. And the one piece is, not that many folks know this, but right now in California, appliances in buildings, those appliances that heat our water and heat our homes and businesses, actually create more air pollution than all of the state's power plants. Part of that is because we figured out how to clean up power plants, and we haven't yet had as many strides on cleaning up the pollution buildings. And so when we move to things like efficient heat pumps that don't burn and combust gas right in the places that we live and work, we're not only reducing targeting the most impactful carbon emissions, we're reducing pollution. Super important for all communities, but particularly communities that are suffering the most from the health impacts of air quality. The second piece that's super important is that heat pumps, kind of efficient heat pumps, can do two things. They can heat homes and they can efficiently cool homes. So right now, as we're getting this heat storm right now at the beginning of October, we talked about the hottest September on record. We kind of have all of these stats that it's like, we know it's getting hotter. Heat storms are increasing. It's almost like they just feel so normal to say these things now. But again, as was mentioned early on, this is life and death, right? Heat causes more deaths than any other other kind of climate disasters, or they really come from heat. So another thing that's consistent across all communities, if somebody did a deep impact into what are the climate impacts going to be in your community, heat always rises to the top as what's going to impact communities the most. And there's a lot of things that cities can do that we will do to kind of add more trees and cool surfaces. But it's also really important that these impacts are happening now. We need to find ways to bring efficient cooling to folks now. Like that's going to be the most equitable way that we save lives, right? Give people access to equitable cooling. And heat pumps are a technology that they're 100% efficient, right? They're actually with new electric rates, at least in PG&E territory. I'm just not as familiar, Justina, with the rate structure down in SCE territory. They're actually incentivizing electrification so folks can save money on their electric bills, especially if they were using window units previously, which are super inefficient. And then really important, when you have air conditioning at your home, you're coming home from working in an outside job, the most times when there's health impacts from heat are at night. So being able to come home and cool off is super important, right? And then if you live in an area where there's air pollution, you can now keep your windows closed at night. You're going to get more filtration from the way that system is set up. And super important, as we're getting more wildfires and smoky days, that people have a way to stay cool in their own homes in a way that's like safe, and you can close those windows when air pollution is coming in. So thinking about building the strategies for pollution-free buildings, for electrifying buildings, again, it's really this sweet spot of thinking about reducing the biggest bang for the buck of emissions in communities, improving public health, and building climate resilience. So really quickly, what are 3 ways that any city from the biggest to the smallest, can learn from Morgan Hill and South San Francisco and how to take this approach. One is making sure that you're leveraging the billions of dollars of new unprecedented federal investment, right? And one thing that's great about the federal investment too, that aligns with what we're talking about today, is there's a big priority on underserved communities. So right now, everyone who has tax liability is eligible for up to $2,000 in federal tax rebates for pollution-free equipment in their homes. But also this California will soon be rolling out point of sale rebate reductions, particularly for low-income folks. And there's a lot of also direct install programs through utility programs across the state. So really making sure to leverage this investment. Working with your local energy provider, whether it's SCE or CPA or SVCE or PCE or a combination of those two, to really make sure that your community is benefiting from local programs that support pollution-free buildings. So in Silicon Valley Clean Energy, we offer over $8,000 for each home to upgrade to pollution-free appliances. We also have a program that works with affordable housing to basically retrofit those buildings at no cost to go to pollution-free appliances. And then third, for the public officials who are on this call, adopting policies and processes at a local level that can actually incentivize property owners at the time when the remodeling to upgrade to electric readiness, right? It's really important that we have the right wiring in place, and that when anybody is going to touch near their water heater or their furnace, that they're making sure that their home or business is ready to move to pollution-free buildings, or even to upgrade right at the time. And there's a lot of things that cities can do to make sure within their own building code, you can make those changes. And then finally, ensuring that your permit processes don't favor fossil fuel appliances, but that it's just as easy for folks right now. In a lot of cities, it can take several weeks if you want to move to something that's pollution free, whereas you can get a permit almost over the counter for reinstalling a gas appliance. So making sure that your own processes are actually helping your community to make the choice that's best for your community and for their own health. So these might not be the most exciting actions that we think about building codes and permit processes when we think about building healthier communities, but they're real levers of change that cities, governments control and can lead to real benefits. Also, often without a lot of external resources needed and required. So those are my final thoughts. I know we want to open it up for questions, so thank you all so much for letting me join today.
Thank you so much, Zoe. This is fantastic. I really want to thank all of the panelists for all of your expertise. And I just love how we did a really big overview and then we kind of zoned in. So, you know, I want to take some question and answer. If anybody has questions that we can take, we do have a member from the youth group that worked on this who said that they were going to call in. And I don't see them here. So Erica, if you find them, just let me know. But do we have any questions at this time that anybody wants to ask? I cannot see everybody.
There is a question in the chat.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll go ahead, Yvonne. I'm curious what types of funding sources you used for your CAP. Thanks. They are in a city similar size to Morgan Hill.
Okay. Do you want to take that, Shannon? I don't know.
Yeah. So I want to say I'm 95% sure it was from the general fund, but I will come back to you with an answer. If you want to maybe type in your email, I can confirm that, but I'm 95% sure it was from the general fund. At the time I was a part-time employee, so I wasn't in the loop of all these sources, but I'm pretty certain that's the answer.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and confirm that, but I'm going to also Zoe and maybe even Christina or Sammy, but you talked about, you know, how the new federal investment has rolled out. And do you know if there's any opportunities within there? Zoe, and then maybe Christina or Sammy, if you have anything to offer.
Yeah, Justina mentioned this, that the EPA actually has a planning grant that it is non-competitive. So all of the subregions, it's so basically in our area, I know that it's Santa Clara County and San Benito County are getting $1 million to do climate action planning without competitive funds. So that's available right now.
In fact, you know what, Justina, if I can pull you back on, and I'm sorry I had to, that I interrupted you, but maybe you can speak to that.
Yes, no, I mean, I think she just mentioned it. So thank you for bringing that up. I think that was a great addition to funds that are already available by from IIJA, from IRA, and then the new EPA grants. That funding is out there and available, and hopefully there are a lot of government associations I know, and I know my colleague High Cartoonian's on the line, but there are several who are offering to local cities, member cities, resources, right, and support for grant writing and to really give you that technical support to vie for those dollars. And I think we might be able to drop some of those resources in the chat.
Awesome. That sounds great. Thank you. I'm going to encourage people to reach out too to their local utility, groups and maybe ask them if they know of resources, CCAs. That's another, I think, area to look into. And so with that, do we have any other questions?
We have one more question, and then also to let you know, Daya is on the line. So let me ask the one last question, and then we can open the floor to Daya. I have a question. I'm curious about the equitable checklist for South San Francisco CAP.
Christina or Sammy? Perfect.
I can speak a little bit to this. So this is kind of a racial equity checklist that we've developed at Ramey & Associates, and it really is essentially a guiding list of questions for cities and policy and program creators to consider and explore and work with in terms of developing these programs. A lot of it is around community engagement and making sure the right people are in the room, everyone has access to the decision-making process, and is really an inclusive way to design these programs to make sure that one, the benefits of these programs are distributed across all people in these cities, and then two, that it recognizes that not all resources are often or have not been distributed equally or equitably in the past, and so trying to kind of correct and make up for those I guess burdens that have fallen across awesome frontline communities and disadvantaged communities. So I'm happy to share that resource if you'd like, and we can connect with Yvonne about that after the call.
That's awesome. Great. While we're finishing and wrapping up, I'd love to ask the panelists if you're comfortable maybe sharing your information in the chat. We can share it out again as well. If people are interested in the slides, we can do that too. But I love how, Sammy, from South San Francisco point of view, this is a benefit, right? To having, as Christina talked about, having that budget and having the ability to do a more comprehensive plan. You get to have certain processes like that I think are very informative to making you have a climate action plan that really gives a big bang and impact. So that's great. And then we'll go ahead and take Dia.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me all right?
We can. You got 2 minutes.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you so much, Yvonne. And thank you, everyone. So my name is Dia Kandra. I'm a sophomore at UC Berkeley. I'm calling in from campus. So apologies for some Wi-Fi issues. I was a resident, or I still am a resident of Morgan Hill. And when I was a junior in high school, I was part of this team called the Morgan Hill Youth Climate Action Team. It was a collection of 8 to 10 high schoolers like myself, and we would constantly research and deliver public comment to the city council passing a climate action plan, which was successful in May of 2021. And this climate action plan was mostly centered around electrification and strengthening the gas ban that had already been in place at that time. I know I'm preaching to the choir because this whole webinar is about like strengthening climate action plans within the Bay Area, within the region, and finding more resources for it. But I do just want to drive home the fact that electrification is like, it should be the #1 priority in all the climate action plans that we're hoping to create in our respective cities, because like not only will like electrified home appliances and like, you know, an electrified built environment with EV chargers be key for decarbonizing, like, you know, it's key to decarbonizing our commercial and residential emissions, and then also transportation. But it's also key just to update our electric infrastructure. Like, honestly, our grid only lasts about 50 to 100 years. The transmission lines that get older make us more vulnerable to wildfires when they get kind of like weathered down due to climate change and things like that. So electrification is going to be like killing multiple birds with the same stone, in terms of climate change, in terms of like reaching our state priorities to adopt EVs within the next 5 to 10 years, and in terms of just making our cities livable for like 50 to 100 more years to come with an updated grid. And I do appreciate all of the discussion here about like how city leadership can step up, because I can say, and maybe there's like multiple advocates in the room, you know, it's one thing to deliver a grassroots effort to the city, and it's always like an empowering feeling, and like you feel proud of the fact that many of your citizens agree with you. But some of the strongest actions should come from city leadership themselves. Like, the city should be the ones taking the initiative in the first place. So I do strongly encourage, like many have already said, to like continue to look for resources that are already being offered by utilities and by CCAs. I know that there's often rebates for like solar water heaters, and like you can go and get a discount if you buy an electrified appliance. One resource that I think is probably underutilized by cities is like lower electricity rates that lower income people have with CARE and FARA programs. PG&E and a lot of the major utilities offer this discounted electricity rate, so that should be continued to be like discussed as like a public education effort. But yeah, just driving home the fact that electrification is key, and I hope to see a lot more cities adopt that, and I thank you all for your leadership.
Thank you so much, Dia. Thank you. She was so instrumental in this. Okay, so I want to just wrap it up. Thank you everybody for coming, and then I'll hand it over to Erica. But you know, what we heard today is that you want to, for your best practices, talk with your staff, understand what your city goals and your city impact is that you're looking to make, what your resources are. And then you want to also make sure that you have a community champions, right? You have to, and we want to empower people here to be that community champion on the Latino Caucus and beyond, right? As long as we're providing you those tools, because we do know that unfortunately our Latino communities and underserved communities, all underserved communities, are bearing a lot of these impacts from climate change, from weather change, from the dangers of heat, you know, inaccessibility to maybe some of the changing technologies because of financial limitations. And we're not going to be able to meet our goals comprehensively all together for the state or even for our local cities if we're not bringing the full population along with us. We want to start with our building codes, we've heard, because that's something where the cities, we really have a lot of control. We want them to be equitable, looking and finding federal investment, other investment areas, and trying to look in maybe non-traditional, and then focusing on your cooling. It was also another great little tidbit that we found out today. So again, thank you to the sponsors. Thank you. Without you, none of this information gets out and none of this happens. So we do thank you for that, and for the specialties in our panelists. And I'm going to hand that over to our Executive Director, Erica Arriaga. It's been a pleasure and an honor to host you today.
Thank you, Yvonne. I want to thank all of our speakers. Thank you, Oscar, Jorge, Eddie, Yvonne, Christina, Sammy, Justina, Shannon, and Zoe. I also want to, as Yvonne said, give a special shout out to our premier sponsors for this event here. That's SCE, and then of course the Silicon Valley Clean Energy. And of course, I want to let everyone know that we are of course proud to offer this sort of programming to you. If you are interested in sharing this message, sharing this webinar, we will have it up on our website in the next couple days, and you're welcome to share it with everyone. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you soon. I will place our final sort of contact information in the chat, and you will see that posted soon. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you. And if I didn't thank you already, Shannon, and so thank you as well. Thanks so much.